Welcome to the In Betwixt and In Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping leaders embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm one of your hosts, John Clark, and the man on the other side of the screen at his home somewhere and in a fake library brought to you by Riverside is Josh Hugo. Josh, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well, John. Always good to see you and be part of this weekly routine. It's a real highlight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a lot of fun to always know that on Thursdays I've got this coming up, and I don't know, just like in this new line of work, having these little passion projects has been a lot of fun. I assume the USC game is also on your mind, Notre Dame USC.
It is, yeah.
It's more so than other games
on my mind. Yeah, it's not as much so. Taking a little reprieve this weekend. We're going to get up to a little cabin up in the mountains, which will be really nice. And yeah, I think we need it. Starting a business is a lot of work. So it's hard work. I guess I'm not the first person to make that acknowledgement, but it's fun, it's energizing, and it's a lot. So taking a little time to take care of yourself is important, and excited to have a little time up in some fresh air.
Oh, that's awesome. How far away?
A couple hours. It's in a little town called Cotopaxi, which happens to be the name of that backpack company, but I don't think that's the...
Not related?
Not related. I don't think so.
Seems like they should be related if they're not.
Well, if you're listening to this in Cotopaxi, and I won't be there by the time this goes live, but...
Or Cotopaxi wants to, support this podcast as our first investor, that'd be fine too.
They have a general store, and I think that's it. I think it's literally like a single store. It's hard to even argue it's a town. They have a school and a post office, so that makes it a town.
I'm just imagining, I know they're different, but like the product, it must be a very colorful town, bright colors everywhere, everything. So that's what I know about Cotopaxi. All right.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Cotopaxi. Maybe you want to sponsor this podcast as well. And if you're listening to this and you work for them, this has been a lot of free advertising for you. So give us a holler, Cotopaxi. Here we go.
All right. To the homework. Take it away.
So last week.
No, I got to do something. Yeah.
You do.
Always throwing this at the beginning. We won't go as long as we did last time, but just want to start up front to remind you, if you're listening, that's great. If you haven't subscribed because you're a first-time listener, we'd love you to subscribe and get our episodes that come out at this point every week. If you can leave a review, we'd love that too, because that helps with circulation. And that's kind of the end of that. But beyond that, encourage you to share this, give other people episodes, the show, just so more people can hear what we have to offer. With that said, Josh, why don't you get us into the homework at this point?
Yeah, so just brief regrounding in last week. So last week we talked about primarily transmission of communication and the communication code, but we also spent some time thinking about kind of the other side of that, the reception of communication. John brought up some really helpful resources and information about distraction and cell phones. So the homework explicitly was you taking some time to think about those 5 different intentions behind communication. Can you remind us?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So the 5 were to care, to celebrate, to critique or to criticize, to collaborate, and to clarify. And so again, like the homework was to think about which of those 5 do you lean towards more naturally? Which of those 5 in a conversation with your spouse, for example, might you tend to seek to do mostly? Like for me, it's to collaborate, to clarify, and for others, it might be to care. So the homework was to just reflect on that, but also I think a little bit related to what John brought up too, which was a kind of a call to action around our distractions and our cell phones. And we actually, like true story, my partner and I, we talked about, we have phones, of course, and my oldest son has a phone. It has some limits on it, but we recognized that throughout the day, there was times in which he would kind of just pull it out. He's allowed to do some homework on it for, what is it called? The language program that you study. Duolingo. He does that, but he was kind of grabbing it a couple times when we would turn on a television show as a family. He might have it out, but I'm like, hey, we also have ours out. So we need to set some boundaries, even if it's not just about active listening, about just distracted moments throughout the day where a phone just creeps into your hand. So I really appreciated that conversation. It helped us a bit. And we had a conversation. We set some boundaries. We set some kind of guidelines, and I think we're going to hold each other accountable. So your point really helped us this week.
Yeah. Well, Josh, why don't you take us into or continue with communication this week? I'll let you just take it away kind of on what our framing is for this week, what we really want to dig into, and I think a conversation that you and I are both excited to have with each other here.
Yeah, thanks, John. So to kind of bridge that gap, last week we talked about the transmission side primarily, a little bit about the reception side and things that might get in the way, so the cell phones, for example. But this week we really want to dive into active listening and the importance of being an active listener as a leader, as a manager, as a human. And we wanted to kind of really kind of reground that in this idea that communication is both transmission and the reception of that communication. And the responsibility is on both parties. It is to be intentional in what you're intending to communicate, your goal behind your communication, you're explicit. Hey, I'm trying to demonstrate some critique here, but it also is the responsibility of the party receiving it to be actively engaged. And so I wanted to actually open it up with a question to you, John, and then you can flip it back to me. But how are you as an active listener? Like, what are your strengths with that? What are the places that you know that you're working on when it comes to active listening, and kind of what gets in the way when you're not at your best as an active listener?
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I think at my age and in the work I've done, I'm at least more aware of the fact that you have to work towards being an active listener. I think so. I often, we've talked on this the last couple episodes, and then I'll get into myself a little bit, but we've talked about how active listening is a two-way street, right? And I think we've even talked about how managers have to set the conditions, or leaders, that people can listen. However, you have an outsized responsibility when you are the one doing the listening to make sure you are listening. Your boss, your partner, your children can do whatever they want to try to get it so that you're set up well to listen, but you have to make a conscious choice to do that. So when I think about myself as an active listener, I do think there's a part of me that has subsided a little bit. I think I have other motivations now, that was always looking to respond. How can I prove my worth? How can I prove I'm right? And so this desire to always be thinking about, like, what's my response to this? Now, I actually think there's a little bit of me as an active listener, especially in moments of disagreement or a heated moment. I guess I could still fall to disagreements, but maybe even beyond that, where my listening, when I get defensive, and maybe that's about some self-doubt I have about whatever the particular area is, or fear that I'm not qualified based on the person I'm talking to give an answer or to respond, I actually go into a little bit of a fight mode. And in my head, I begin to formulate, what reason can I find to fight against this? I think my wife, and I'm saying this knowing my wife and I have talked about this, I think this pops up with my wife, where I get defensive about whatever it is, like how we raise our kids or how we're going to handle a particular situation. And rather than shutting down that fight mode, I tend to try to find just reasons to defend myself for whatever I disagree with her on, right? And so, perfect example of this yesterday, my wife had told me several times that she had a haircut last night. And I had heard that. I knew she said at some point in the future she had a haircut. I did not know that it was going to occur last night after I'd picked up the kids, and I knew I had a very finite amount of time to get them to their religious ed classes, and dinner had to be made. And so she told me, like, hey, I'm about to leave. I was like, what? And she goes, I told you this. I even put it in a text. And I, instead of being like, okay, we're just going to do the best with this moment, I obviously didn't think this through, this is on me, because she had communicated this. It became more about defensiveness of, why didn't you get the food ready? Well, that's because she was finishing work for the day. Why can't you just stay here for a few minutes and help me get it going? Well, because she has an appointment, and that hairstylist has other clients that they have to do after Meg. And so all that to say, that's a small example, and actually pretty small potatoes compared to other ways that this has played out for me, in terms of how, instead of just in the moment saying, like, okay, I misunderstood something, or I need to frame my thinking, or I need to hear their point of view, I go more towards, like, what are all the ways that I can build up my argument? And I stop listening. So it's not even about, like, I get distracted by something else. I actually become more combative in my non-active listening about, how can I argue against this? And you can imagine in work or life, especially in things that are more important than my wife going to get a haircut, that can play out pretty negatively. And I actually don't fully allow myself to be influenced by the other person, because I'm trying to create other arguments in my head. So I know that about myself. I'm working on it a lot actually, and think I've gotten a lot better at it, but it is a tendency I have to fight against. So pretty long answer there, Josh, but I'd love to hear about yours too. When you think about yourself as an active listener, and similar to you, what are some of the internal things that you maybe are going through when it's being a better active listener as well, or when you're not being an active listener?
Yeah, right on. Well, first of all, thanks. That's a really great reflection. And I think a few things that I heard from that relate to my tendencies as well. I think that desire to kind of be constructing you mentioned like constructing your own response in your mind as you're listening to somebody or as you're in front of somebody is a really that resonates. So yeah, sharing a personal example, I think the impact that you have on others when you don't listen well is a real it really affects trust. It really affects your impact on others. And I think different personality types and different relationships have different levels of impact, right? So if it's a distant friend who you forgot to call back on a Tuesday and you talk on a Friday, maybe different, right? But when you talk to your wife about something or your partner at home about something and it doesn't get communicated through both transmission and reception, it can really cause a lot of harm. So I think it's vulnerable for you to be able to share that. And I think it's important to lean into that vulnerability when you think about this concept. And so for me, so first of all, thanks. For me, yeah, I think a lot of that resonates. I think there's a couple things that happen. One of which is, yes, I'm trying to construct a response, but I also, if I'm not being mindful, can get caught up with a statement earlier in somebody's transmission and I start to get it percolates, right? Like I get kind of like pulled into this tangent in my mind about what somebody said earlier on. And so I've learned that about myself that one, I either need to politely like say, actually, can we pause on that? You really said something that's making me think. Is this okay for me to ask that question? Which in some cases it is. And depending on the nature of what's being communicated, sometimes it's not. So it's a little bit of an art, a dance to figure that out. But I often find myself getting caught on a tangent mentally. It's not even thinking about how to construct a response, but more about, oh, what did that mean? So some of it's that. Some of it is preparing what I want to say in response to that person and kind of thinking about how I can articulate an answer. And some of it is like the deep down part of like, what is really actually important in this interaction? Like, I think there's that degree of like, do I want to make sure I look competent? Do I want to make sure I look smart? Do I want to make sure that I come across as proving I'm engaged by having something really sharp and concise to share? Or is it simply just me being able to like be present and mindful and just truly listen without needing to feel the pressure to say something in response?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've learned over time that a lot of it is the latter. Not every time that somebody is talking to me, do they actually feel like I need to have something to say. And that's almost lowered the pressure I feel sometimes to be a better active listener because I don't actually always need to have a response. I simply can say, well, thank
Or
you.
even, I mean, good active listeners aren't afraid to slow the conversation down.
Yeah, say more. What do you mean by that?
So you say something and there's a long pause between my response. Like, that's okay. I think we live, and maybe this is just true of how humans communicate forever, but there is like more often than not this need to just be ready to respond right away in a conversation or be ready with the next idea versus some white noise, just some silence for a minute to signal to that person, hey, I fully listened to you. I'm taking that in. And now I'm thinking about how I want to respond to what you're saying, or I want to add on to some valid points you made. I really admire people who have that disposition, that have a little bit more of a reservedness that I think can sometimes be coded in the wrong way as, I don't know, not aggressive enough or not ambitious enough or not taking the lead enough. And actually what it is, it's a profound ability to listen deeply and intently, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think to your point, we can still be ready to respond, or we can still respond, but it's okay that the conversation slows down,
I
right?
love
That
that.
it doesn't take the pace that I think a lot of us think it has to take. And look, like so much is shaped by what we hear on talk radio, even listening to sports people on the morning shows talk and they're just screaming at each other and interrupting each other and there is no space in between it. I understand that's good for listenership and how people watch stuff, but it's not good in terms of how we absorb how people communicate about how we apply that in our own lives either, right? So, and I think to what you said, I really appreciate what you're saying. I've known you a long time. And I think there's similar purpose behind our failure to be active listeners sometimes, but yours is different. I do think yours is like you will latch onto something early and you really want to understand what they meant by that word, or that's different than how I would think about it. I want to think about that so I can ask them about that. So there's a little bit more curiosity to yours than mine, which like, at least in the way I explain mine, which is a little bit more defensiveness. And I think both of those are rooted in the same thing, though, of getting caught up on something.
Right.
Instead of inviting ourselves to like push that to the side so that we can just hear what people have to say.
Yeah. Write it down.
You can also, exactly.
Have a little notepad and just put question mark word, whatever the word was. What did that mean? And then come back to it. Like just trust that you can come back to things too.
Yeah. Josh, keeping us moving forward here, I guess for you personally, and we can be quick on this one because I know we want to get into the limbo and then dig deeper on some other questions.
Yeah.
But based on the way that sometimes you don't actively listen well, based on what you said, what impact does that have on your teams?
Yeah.
When you've led, let's talk about that specifically rather than our partners, because we spent some time on our partners. But like when on teams you've led, what impact has that had?
Yeah. I mean, I think it breaks trust fundamentally. Like it just means that people stop coming to you with the kinds of concerns that they would otherwise come to you with. They're like, well, I can't trust that this person's going to hear it out and do something with it, even if the solution is simply not even the solution. The response is not a solution. It simply is an acknowledgement. Like, hey, Johnny, thanks so much for bringing that concern. We thought about it. I don't know that we can do anything with it, but I just want to let you know I heard you, right? Like when you truly hear somebody out, it's not that they always believe that you need a solution to their problem, but it simply could be an acknowledgement. And when you're in leadership, you're going to have a lot of problems brought to your plate consistently. And people understand on a certain level, a lot of people, I should say, understand that they're communicating a concern. They probably realize there won't be an immediate solution, if any, but your goal is to be able to just hear it out and to come back and kind of tie a bow around and say, this is what we've heard, this is what we're doing. When that doesn't happen, people stop coming to you with those things, or it creates back channels, or it becomes a little bit of that toxicity of like, hey, John, I talked to Josh last week and Josh didn't ever get back to my email. He never came back to me about this thing. And could you talk to him now? And it creates like third party solutions. It creates people who don't go to the source. So I say all of that. I think your question was more direct about, for me, like when I haven't listened very well. I think that I'll say two things. Like, this is something that I probably do better in my professional setting than I do in my personal setting, which when I think about like my own piece as a leader, people include both my family and the people at work. And sometimes I've biased my attention towards those at work. Don't know why fully, maybe a little assumption of like,
You're kind of stuck with me if you're in my personal life.
Right. Like, but that's not a good way to operate. So I will name that.
Yeah.
I say professionally, I've done better, but when I'm not an active listener very well at work and the impact on the team, I think one, it's kind of what I just said, is people probably stopped coming to me. But more likely what it becomes is in the individual conversation I have with people is I go to solving something that's not actually the solution too soon. Like I haven't truly actively listened deeply enough to understand what the problem was. I hear something, I get stuck on it, and I say, here's what we should do. And so a person leaves the conversation feeling like I was trying to fix something, they wanted me to feel it, and I've learned over time I needed to ask that question, do you want me to fix this or feel it? Kind of goes back to that idea of, do you want me to show care or do you want me to collaborate? And when I'm not actively listening well, I'm not reading the room well enough, and when I'm not figuring out like the intention of that person enough to be curious and ask, I jump to solutions too quickly, and what it leaves that person feeling is like, maybe that was just a waste of time because he proposed a solution that wasn't actually something I needed. It kind of maybe doesn't break trust fully, but it certainly doesn't build it. And so those are a couple of reactions. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to summarize a little bit of what you said there to then build into my point. Ultimately, I think when you're doing things that you talk about, one, getting myopically focused on one thing that they said earlier and not hearing the whole of it, or your job is, or if you're the type of listener who's just like, well, they want an answer from me, so I'm going to start developing an answer to tell them what to do. They get annoyed. People get really annoyed because like, you didn't hear everything I said. I actually am not looking for an answer for you, or the answer I'm looking for is very different than what you gave me. The thing with me that it can lead to when I get into this defensiveness and start building arguments against it to prove my worth for whatever reason is, number one, I think people, and I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, my facial expressions and tics. I think there is a part of me that tenses up, and I do think my face showcases that emotion more so than others. And so people in that moment already feel like, oh, he's annoyed or irritated or already disagrees with me, or I can tell he thinks I'm wrong. And then it creates this place of like, they're not feeling as comfortable as they could to share what they want. And then in the future, that makes it more of this, well, what if John disagrees with me? Is he going to be still receptive to what I have, or is he going to get defensive and kind of triggered a little bit? I don't love to use the word triggered because I don't feel triggered, but you get what I'm saying. So obviously when you do that with a large team or in a group setting versus the person, I disagree with you, but I fully listened. And now I have taken the time to articulate why I disagree with it. That feels a lot different than someone like me who's already bubbling up with those ideas and is like ready to pounce to a certain degree. Right? Like just to be fully honest. So
body language. So key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit, Josh. Let's
Yeah.
jump into the limbo here. Let's just
Yeah.
briefly talk about what are the tensions that people might have that lead to a lack of active listening, or just what are some of the other limbos that we want to talk about before maybe we start answering some questions about our
Yeah,
own.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll just hit this pretty quickly. I think we just try to come back as much as we can to the concept that the basis of our podcast is helping leaders navigate limbo, having
Yeah.
leaders navigate this liminal space. And so just to kind of reinforce what makes this concept of active listening fit into this liminality, into this limbo space. I think one is the sense that we're supposed to maybe at times be telling others what to do as a leader as opposed to listening to them. So maybe that's the first part, is like this tension between, well, you're talking to me, but I'm the leader, right? I'm the manager, I'm the supervisor. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me, but like I know HQ told me to tell you what to do. So I'm kind of just waiting for you to finish, and now I'm going to tell you what to do, right? So recognizing that's a tension, because that's not an effective way of thinking about serving other people, but it is a piece that might feed into the way that we're operating.
And I mean, I think too, a key premise that our work is about and this podcast is about is too often managers aren't taught that, like, yeah, you can make decisions while fully listening to people. You can
Right.
give advice, you can say which direction we're going, but it has to be combined with the other things. So I think you're 100% right. But unfortunately, so much of like the popular mechanisms and ideas around leadership are you make decisions, you tell people what to do. And so new managers come in with that idea, and that's what they're already aimed to do. So they rarely listen all the way before determining, well, if I'm going to prove myself as a leader, I got to tell them what to do. Sorry, but like, good point. Yeah, next
No,
one.
that's I think that articulates it and captures
Yeah.
it well. I'm just going to hit one other one too.
Yeah.
I think the other piece of tension is you're sitting in a meeting with 15 other fires potentially, hopefully not that many, but like there's a million things that oftentimes you're responsible for. And you're sitting with somebody in their weekly one-on-one. You have a screen to your right. You have 15 Teams messages blowing you up. You have your wife on the phone about a kid who's sick at home. You have your boss's meeting this afternoon and you have to report back. Like, you can absolutely find a million things to be thinking about that don't involve the person across from you. And so the tension you're navigating is, I want to be present for you. I want to be an active listener with you. And your problems are important-ish in the grand scheme of things. But if you don't convey that, and if you literally don't believe that what the most important 30 minutes that you could be spending all week is with that person across from you, that's the kind of limbo that you have to navigate. And what often helped me the most in thinking about that is, on any given week, I would have 10 to 15 meetings a day with different people, parents, families, coworkers, staff members, etc. But that person across from me might only have one meeting with me all year. That person across from me might only have one meeting with me for the next 3 weeks. And I'm their manager, I'm their supervisor, I'm their boss. And so when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, it makes it much easier for you to find yourself more present in that meeting. That's the most important thing you can be doing all week, is sitting across from that person you manage.
Yeah,
And
I want to
go ahead.
also just give like a push on. So I think you've experienced, Josh, but we're leading at a time, I think, when computers and technology like became more prevalent in terms of you always had your computer on you, and it's when you set norms in a meeting. I remember once hearing that somebody, and I disagree with this completely, said, when your boss or whoever's leading the meeting tells you that you have to put your screen at quarter or put your phones away, they're exerting undue power over you. And my response to that is, no, the true power comes in when, and maybe it's a framing for why we're putting our computers down, or only one person's going to have their computer up to check messages coming in, or we're going to turn our radios down, is so that we can share listening power together and actively hear each other, versus thinking what is on my computer is more important than the people in the room, right? Or the people, or more importantly, maybe the people we're talking about in this room. So the kids we're talking about, or the staff we're talking about, or the clients we're talking about. And so there is a way to push back on that idea that isn't just like, put your computers down because you need to listen to me. It's, hey, we want to all be active listeners. Let's get rid of those distractions so we can honor the things and people we're going to talk about and the people who are sharing those ideas in this room. So I just want to stamp that, because that was something that always rubbed me a little the wrong way, I thought.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the right move to make, is to push back and say, no, this is the most important thing we can be doing, is to be present for the people in this room. And then, of course, assign an individual to be responsible for other things that you might need to know about, but the whole team needs to be focused. I love that. So I think what we wanted to leave you all with is a list of questions, and we're not going to talk through all of them in this podcast, but we're going to put them in the podcast notes, and it could be considered an active listening audit. We've pulled these questions out of two sources. One of them is a great book that we referred to, I believe, last week called The Communication Code. And another is a derivative of it from the Giant World. But truthfully, like you can pull these questions, you could chat with ChatGPT, or you could go on and just Google, like, what are 5 to 10 questions that would really be important to think about from an active listening standpoint. So we're going to talk through just a couple of those. John, do you want to take us away with a few questions from that audit that really hit you?
So Josh, one, and I think one of the questions that you think about is how often do I jump in and interrupt others while they're speaking? So let's hear a little bit about from you. Like if you were to do an audit, is that an always thing? Is that a sometimes thing? Is that a never thing?
I do it sometimes, for sure. Absolutely. And it's something that I think my intentions, are pure oftentimes. It's not usually, I wasn't listening, can you repeat? Sometimes that does happen, but it's more about, like the squirrel, quote unquote, like is a dog, like a squirrel runs across the screen. I'm like, whoa, let's talk about that. A little bit of a distraction. So I need to be aware that interrupting and jumping in my mind is viewed as like a way to catalyze conversation, but it doesn't. Rarely does it. There's a handful of people who I can, bat back and forth with like that, and it's fine, I think. But if you're that person and you actually are like, Josh, you are annoying when you do that, tell me that. But it's not a good quality. And it's one of the things that as you think about this, do you jump in often? Do you cut people off? And why? Right. And being on the other side of people who cut you off, it's frustrating. So I think that it's pretty kind of universal in its impact on others. So think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say I'm like somewhere between rare and sometimes. Now, I will admit that just because I'm not jumping in doesn't mean I'm fully listening. I think we've been through that a little bit, but I think I used to do a lot more of this, but have actively worked to not as much as I can. However, I'm sure there are people on this podcast that are like, that's not true, John. This podcast.
Hey, this is a lead generator for us, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you can generate some leads with all the people who are like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? That is definitely not true.
True. Let's do another one here, and we'll just do one more. Josh, how much are you seeking to? I feel like you've talked about this one, so I don't want to do this. Let's do another one here, actually. So that one was going to be, how much are you planning your response versus fully listening? I feel like we've done that one a lot. So I guess
open-ended questions. How about that one, John?
Let's do that one. Yeah. How often are you responding with open-ended questions for the person versus more like statements? Like how good and effective are you at like showing you're listening by asking them further questions to let them explain what they said?
Yeah. I think there's two other things that happen. One is what you said, which is a statement. The other is a yes or no question, right? Like a close-ended question, like, did that make sense, right? Who's going to say, no, that didn't? Some people who have trust with you might say that didn't make sense, or like, did everything I say, does that resonate? I think that you can tweak language and say like, share how that hit you, like, or what's your reaction to that? Or like, how are you feeling when I said that? Like getting good at asking open-ended questions, man, that's taken a lot of energy and time.
Can I push you on that though? I think these are questions when I'm the listener and you have said something and I want to ask questions to further understand what you said. You're asking, you sound like these are questions you ask after you've made a statement. Oh, yeah. Right.
I think it goes both ways. Yeah. I think it can go both ways, but I think that, as the listener, I think asking like to clarify in a way, like, can you go back to that and share a little bit more about what you meant by that? Or here's what I'm hearing is that how I should be understanding it? I guess that could be answered yes or no, but I think you want to lead into explanation.
That's also summarizing what they've said. So how often do you summarize someone to let them know you fully understood them, and you give them the chance to add on to that if you miss something, right? So that's another skill, right?
Yeah, that is.
So in terms of yourself, how often do you think you use open-ended questions to build better understanding or to show them you listened, or even to summarize? How often do you summarize ideas?
Yeah.
To showcase like that, then they get a chance to respond and say like, no, you missed something I said. How often do you do that, or how well do you do that?
I would give myself a 7 or 8 out of 10. I've really worked on that much more because I think it recenters the conversation that my role is to demonstrate I'm listening better. So I would say at my best, I'm a 7 or an 8. Sometimes I'm lower.
I would agree with that. I will say one of my strategies for working through that kind of defensiveness or that desire to prove a point or to disagree, and you've probably noticed this with me too, you can probably see it build up when we're kind of having passionate moments of talking about this or other things, is I try to reframe my doubt or what I think is the right thing into a question so that I'm like pushing myself to say, I think I need to fully understand them before I argue against that, because maybe we're not as far off as I think we are. Right. Now, sometimes those questions can still be particularly pointed, but
Right.
it at least helps me to not just go to the defensive mode. It helps me to build better understanding. So anyway, Josh and I, there's a whole list of these that we're going to put in the show notes. Again, you can, to Josh's point, Google questions to assess my active listening skills. Wherever you might find these, we encourage you to do it, but do 5 or 10 of these. And frankly, this is where Josh and I would argue that having a coach or someone you work with to go through these is important. Someone like Josh, myself, with you and your team, and nothing else. Ask your partner to do it with you. So it's not just you in your head doing it, but you can have a little bit more back and forth dialogue to help you further unpack who you are as an active listener, right? Josh, any final thoughts? And then I'll let you close this out here.
No, I think that's a great push. I think having even somebody watch you in a meeting, watch you in a coaching situation with somebody else, like truly somebody who's like coaching you doing this can illuminate pieces that even yourself might not identify and the person you work with might not be willing to identify. So a lot of what I've gained in this area has actually come through feedback, coaching, and insights from other people. One note we're excited to share with you is that next week we do have a special guest coming onto our podcast, and we're going to be very excited to introduce you to this special person. And so more to come on that. Without any further ado, we always want to emphasize download this podcast, share this podcast. We're starting to push this into some new spaces, including Facebook and Instagram. So hopefully if you found it on there that you choose to follow along, subscribe and share in those spaces. Give us a 5-star review. Leave us some comments in the feedback sections, and we would love to connect further. Until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.